Hey, welcome back. Thanks for being here. As you remember yesterday from my keynote address, where I introduced Scott already twice, and I forgot to insert that shameless plug for his presentation, but it wasn't necessary. All of you guys are already here. Great. So, as you remember, I talked about how IAM can actually enable innovation and how it can really give that agility to the enterprise. And I'm really happy to have Scott present his use case today. Trust but control, how about managing privileges without killing the productivity? Thanks a lot, Scott.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Hopefully we have good volume. All right, we do. So as Felix said, my name is Scott Carlson. I work at PayPal. Been there for 4 years now, and I am the solutions architect. I run the solutions team at PayPal. Our whole team is responsible for managing everything not customer-facing. So if it's on PayPal.com, another team takes care of it, but my team takes care of everything else inside the data center, employee space, and some portions of the customer identity. And today what I want to talk to you about is how we have started to sort of change our thinking around managing the privilege of our people and what they do. We started a journey a number of years ago by trying to figure out how to take away everybody's access. And we came up against this sort of hard anger where people really feel like they want to do their job, and if we take away their access, they can't do their job. And so we started to hate to have that conversation over and over and over and over. We wanted to go in front of the business and tell them how we could solve their problem, not, no, I'm sorry, you just can't do it, deal with it. So I've got a couple slides around who PayPal is, but what I want to do is not really cover the PayPal businessy side of it, but I want to point out how this changes what I have to think about in the identity space. I don't know if everybody here is aware, but PayPal is made up of a whole bunch of different brands that are worldwide. I hope everybody here has a PayPal account. If you don't, please go get one. But up here, we have like 5 US brands that you may or may not recognize. Braintree, which is more of a merchant solution with Venmo, social payments. Paydiant is point of sale, white labeled apps for MCX, currency at Subway, et cetera. We have Zoom, which is a money remittance, send money really fast to India. PayPal Credit, sort of like layaway digitally. You can get money to pay for your Christmas gifts. And then the big PayPal.com that everybody knows and loves. But what's unique about us, I can't forget to mention our Cyactive acquisition, which is an anti-malware company that we bought in Israel last year, to help us do predictive analytics, and that's kind of what part of the scope of this talk is about. What's unique about our different brands is that we manage them as unique named entities, which means the people who work for them recognize themselves as that identity. And so when I bring on a security person from Braintree, they say, hi, I'm the security person from Braintree, but I need to do everything that the PayPal people need to do. So you have to know me as a Braintree person and a PayPal person, and let me have the same sort of rights into the data center. We have that same sort of problem with all of these brands. We also do business in a lot of countries. I think probably a lot of you have some data centers and stuff, some offices in some funny countries out there. But we're coming across a lot of sort of government-type controls where countries like to enforce certain requirements on employees, certain requirements on data, certain requirements on tracking. So if somebody lives in a country, for example, Turkey, you have to track every single thing they click through the internet because it's against the law to go to bad things. So when you start to let them in your data center, there's a bunch of different controls that you have to apply to them from their identity in that country. So that's also in play at PayPal as well. So one of the things that we have decided that we need to do is we need to stop trying to detect everything, because there really is just no way that we can build a comprehensive set of rules that apply to everything. There is no way to get to 100% to detect. Plus, as somebody tried to argue with me once, if you can react in 0 seconds, you never need to prevent anything. But we all know that you can never react in 0 seconds. So it's better to figure out what people are supposed to do, predict what's bad, and then start to prevent based on the use cases of those people in those roles. You cannot build a comprehensive set of use cases. So I'm going to acknowledge, though, right now that the people who have a SIM out there, There is a set of Security 101 rules that come with all that stuff. That is, track the bad things, right? Somebody takes over root, somebody logs in as somebody else. The things that everybody already knows, that stuff comes out of the box, and that's easy. We're going to assume that people just turn that stuff on. Like I said earlier, there's sort of two parts of PayPal. There's the outside part of PayPal. We maintain 170 million customer identities. And I'm not going to talk about those today because there's a whole swath of things we do to protect the customer identity. What I want to talk about instead is what we do inside, or at the employee, the vendor, the AWF, the contractor, all that stuff. People have seen a slide like this, I'm sure. This one is from the Verizon report for 2015. I think I can probably find a report that has numbers from 50 to 98% of all security attacks are caused by insiders. Pick a vendor, pick a slide, and you can find lots of big numbers. This one happens to be 55%. But what's interesting about this one is about privilege abuse. Either people are misusing their credential to do their job, somebody is taking their credential to do something bad, somebody external is coming in, but it ends up being counted as privilege abuse or misuse. And what's important about this is the word entrusted here. And that's kind of something that we're fighting with at PayPal. How much do we trust to people? We have a lot of customer service people who absolutely need to see your PII to help you on the phone. It is your money, it is your identity, you have to show them your passport. They have to help you, so they must see it all. The question is, what do I trust them to do with it after they have to access that? A couple of terms real quick to finish up the rest of the slides that I'm about to see. So I'm going to define identity as a unique identifier for an employee, vendor, customer, or merchant. So Scott Carlson has an account, Scott Carlson, Scott.Carlson, whatever. And then I have an account, which is an environment-specific one of those. I might have one for Corp, I might have one for extranet, I might have one for PayPal, I might have one for the data center, I might have one for the EDW. I mean, I might have 20 of them when I'm all said and done. So this is a bit of an eye chart. Hopefully you can see it. But essentially what we're trying to do, and this is our overall strategy at PayPal, is we're trying to build a definition of what our attack surface is. If you take a look on the left, we have an environment that is our employee environment, our office of the CIO. On the right-hand side, we have the office of the CISO. So essentially, the CIO is responsible for making employees productive. They control the entire employee space. And in our world, the CISO has to protect everybody in partnership with the CIO. So on the left, one of the challenges, before you can do any of this, is to define what this stuff means to you. What is excess access? If your person, for example me, needs root access to everything to do their job, there almost is no excess access. But yes, there is, because I have no business being in the data warehouse. So all never means all. It means all to the thing. And so when you start to go through this, what this is it's not a role mapping exercise. Don't do that, because it doesn't make any sense. You will never get to the point where you can define all of the roles for all of the people. So in this space, what we're first doing, and we've been doing this for about a year now in partnership with a lot of different people, is trying to figure out what this attack surface is, right? What kind of high privilege accounts exist? What kind of role-based roles exist? How do we figure out what tools then we need to apply to our business use cases where people have to do their job in the right country, in the right tool? Once we have this definition, we can start to apply technology to it. As you would imagine, so PayPal is in the 6 figures of servers and desktops in our environment. And so it's not trivial to just buy something off the shelf. You cannot just go and buy the point solution in the place and hope it scales. So not only do we have a whole bunch of custom stuff, but we still have to rely on all the standard stuff that comes in. So, we have stuff that monitors AD and stuff that monitors LDAP and stuff that monitors servers. Again, the stuff that comes with. But what we have started to augment it with is, once we have this definition on the left, which is what our definitions are, how do we then build that into threats? How do we use high-speed analytics? How do we use other tooling? How do we use roll-ups to better sort of identify when somebody is starting to behave inappropriately, so that I can say, I trust you to do this, but you have just verved off into the side. You have never done this before. I use this sort of story when I'm explaining this to people when they don't get it. I use my president, Dan Schulman. To me, it's very likely that he has never sent a zip file out of PayPal, ever. If he ever does that, it's probably a problem. So in his case, that's one of those certain threat vectors of data leakage. So his role as president, he sees all this stuff, but he has zero access to any systems. He has all the access to the data. So if his account is ever doing anything that it shouldn't, that's an immediate red flag for my people to take a look at. So we try to break this down when we start to monitor our environment. We have a look at the people, or the account security, and we have a look at the machines, or the machine security. What we have decided is that bad things can happen from bad machines, and bad things can happen from good machines. We have decided that bad things can happen from accounts you have never seen before, and we have decided that the account that has been there forever, call it administrator or ad.globaladmin or Scott Carlson, those accounts that have been there forever can all of a sudden start doing bad things. So what we have tried to sort of build patterns on is, number one, how do we decide, based on your identity, what accounts are good, how they got there, and where they came from? When we take a look at PayPal, some of the, what we call extinction events, we consider the things that would be really, really bad to PayPal that we might not recover from. Take a look at the topic of financial instruments, right? You trust us with your money. If anything ever happens to your money, that is game over for me. So I have to add this financial instrument to this. What things could happen with people who are allowed to move money around, where they need access to all the money? When that triggers an event, how do I track that? So we have a authorized user doing an authorized thing, maybe sending it to an unauthorized place. Again, that's a user thing. The Cyactiv company that I mentioned is a machine scoring thing. They essentially do predictive malware. Is this machine misbehaving? So that's the part on the right. For the rest of the talk, I'll focus on the part on the left. How do we deal with the people? What technology have we put into place to actually start to do this now in reality? Oh, but first, why should we trust anyone ever? We're PayPal. We should never trust anything. Like, our money's in the data center. I can't trust anybody, right? This kind of goes back to the thing I said at the beginning, which is I hire people to do their job, right? I have a NOC that must fix everything really fast on Cyber Monday. I have a SOC that has to respond to events. I'm the most phished site on the internet. I think everybody here gets lots of emails from PayPal a day. We have the highest phishing volume. We do around 1,800 site takedowns a day, for example. So these things are real. So I really can't trust anybody, but I have to. I have to trust the employees. I have to allow them to do their job. So we've tried to break things down, specifically in our data center, into essentially a 3-layered trust zone model. On the left, we'll call it our user zone. This is where the people sit. VPN, Wi-Fi, they sit at their desk. We have to give people access to just come to work, right? They come to the intranet, they do their HR, the stuff that 100% of the people are allowed to do. That's kind of a green trust zone. And we give them access to the network, right? They can plug their corporate device in, but they can't plug their non-corporate device in. We give them access to the desktop. The administrators can log in, they can log in, nobody else can log in. We encrypt their desktop. Only they can see their files, not everybody can see their files. Applications, everybody gets to intranet.paypal. They don't get to, superpurchasingsystem.paypal. The standard stuff that you would expect in a corporate environment is the stuff that we get to apply to our 18,000 users across the world. Then we start to get in a little bit more scary, right? We have 100% separation between the data center and the employee space. They are not layer 2 adjacent, they're through lots and lots and lots and lots of controls because we consider our data center our Fort Knox. So we have an access zone. We have a zone that's multi-factor authenticated, very specific roles, require VP level approval to get through into like a Linux jump host or a Bastion host, and a Citrix farm. One of the things that we believe in is that when we let people into our data center, they can do what they need to do, but they can never take anything out, which is kind of where Citrix comes in. The people consider it like the white glove thing. Seen those medical machines on TV where you put the glove on and you stick your hand in a little case and you mess with it and you pull your hand back out. But nothing ever leaves. That's our philosophy with the data center. Anything that leaves is in a batch job or a controlled target. Nothing people get to take out. They don't get to take logs. They can look at them, sure. Every once in a while, of course, you have to acknowledge that you send a CORDM to IBM or whatnot. But that, again, is not from the data center, through the thing to the person, out the corporate proxy. It's all got to be controlled in the data center. So you have to control this access zone. So then when you get into the data center zone, there's sort of 4 big buckets that we break things down into. This is a little bit misordered, but the data repository level, where all the data is. You could consider it databases, caches, SQL, NoSQL, Couchbase, Mongo, pick a technology. We probably have it, and we consider it a data repository. The data itself. A lot of this access, when you make a decision, you have to consider what the data is. And so one of the things about trusting people that we've come to realize is you can never solve this problem with 100% of any one topic area. So you can't install network controls around your database and have it protect your unencrypted data. That's just silly. So what you have to do is you have to take this all the way down to the data level. And I can say, if I guarantee that I have 100% encrypted all of my PII with an HSM, then I can let more people in, because if they steal it, it really is mathematically unusable. So I can put that in as part of my trust formula. Then I have my server and my applications. Linux servers, everybody logs in, they get sudo or whatnot. People log into applications. We have Oracle Enterprise Manager, SAP Manager, blah, blah, blah Manager, Storage Manager, all these things that are in a data center. But in addition to that, we have Splunk and logging systems and whatnot that keep really good track of all of our things that are flowing around. Sometimes that gets a little scary. And actually, one of the interesting things about our application is that our developers get to go in there and mess with those. This is where you get into the whole DevOps, SecDevOps, blah, blah, blah ops that people are coining. In a world where we have to be both a bank, a financial services company, and we have to pivot tomorrow when somebody like Square, Stripe, or blah, blah, blah announces a new product, my developers log in and release the new thing. I have to control their access to that as well. So you have to be ready for these people to go in and mess with something inside your data center. But it doesn't need to be your whole data center. So one of the things we've done, I mentioned it before, is we are trying to move away from buying a point solution that solves a problem to some more strategic partnerships that help build a sort of set of patterns, set of solutions, and roll it all up into something that we can use. One of the vendors that we have a specific focus on lately is Beyond Trust. They're here at the show. They've done a lot of work with us to help figure out how to roll all this stuff together. They have some tools that we're specifically started to focus on that allow us to deal with our use cases, not building a dashboard, not building a skin. They take care of that. That's what vendors are for, right? When I pick single solutions and do things like, how do I manage privilege? What do people understand? You end up spending time on things that you do not need to worry about. I think somebody said it during the keynote, right? We need to focus on things that are business enablers. I don't need to hire 10 Tableau people to write a report because I have 6 different logging systems. That's just dumb. We think it's best to try to combine all that stuff into data warehouses and whatnot. So back to the user zone here. When I break things down across the user zone, I've lumped things into some buckets that we have the tool focus on and some things that we have dealt with the end users about. Things that the tools are helping us with are privilege escalation. We all acknowledge that people need to install software. The common joke I use is admin assistants need calendar creator and things like that. You obviously need to let them do that, but they certainly don't need administrative rights to their machine. Windows 10 helps in those areas, but there are all sorts of different privilege escalations and tracking and back-end tools that we can help manage some of those things for our users. Developers are an interesting beast. They need to play with things that they download from open source repositories on the internet. As a purist security person, the last thing you want is random guy to random website downloading a piece of software that you have never seen and installing it on a desktop that they have probably customized because they don't like the security software you put on it. But they can't be that special. That is a known pattern now. We've been doing this for a lot of years. Everybody understands that this set of users needs to do this. You can control what they do and still allow them to do it. Yep, you can install software, but only on this one, only yours. Oh, and by the way, we'll whitelist GitHub and some of the other ones. Sorry, you can't get it from malware sites or uncategorized, etc. You start to build a set of controls that actually make sense for these people, because what they're really asking to do is to do their job. This is not a one-size-fits-all model. Some people get some of the software, other people don't. One of the things that we do in our desktop space is we have a standard base image, Mac and PC, and everybody gets 100% of the Security 101 controls. We'll call them anti-malware, antivirus, lockdown, encryption, data loss prevention. I'll move into the customer service space, and I think, what does my customer service person need to do? Well, they need to go to my ERP and my customer management thing. They do not need to surf the web. They do not ever need to sneakernet anything with DLP. They probably should never send email to their kids. So I can start to apply controls to them that I don't need to do with developers. I have a customer tracking system. Why does a customer service person need to send an email? Sorry, I'll apologize to them. Maybe they get to skin their background. Maybe they don't get to stream movies off of Netflix from work. So some people get some things and others don't. We have probably 4 main categories at PayPal when we think about our business model. We have customer service, that's the most locked down. We have admins, which are the least locked down. Everybody is required to have the security controls. If they turn them off, they're done. They get kicked off the network, they get yelled at, wall of shame, some version of that. And then there's people in the middle. There's people whose job it is to research malware. There's people whose job it is to look at questionable sites that take PayPal. For example, we do not allow PayPal to pay for nicotine, marijuana, drugs online. No matter if it would be illegal in Amsterdam, you can't use PayPal to pay for it. So there's people who need the rights to go do that stuff because it's their job. On the more political end, sort of the bottom 4 are something that is a partnership with your community. The one thing that we've realized with this effort is that our first year is mostly about communication. You have to understand why they're doing things the way they do it, and in our case, it's because the system has been there for 10 years, and that's how they do it. If you get down to the root of why they're doing something a certain way, they'll likely explain to you why they need to do it, and then they're honestly totally open to doing it a different way. That makes more sense. So we ran across somebody recently, this is a pretty interesting use case, where a certain manager in customer service had to send anti-credit card abuse faxes to the police. So it had to be a manager in customer service, so that's customer service, and it had to be fax, and it had to be the actual credit card number on the fax, because this was somebody who had potentially had their house broken into, and we needed to say, all right, so John Smith used this credit card on his account, and he has these other 20, so go do something about those, FBI or police. And so they were, downloading, they were doing it bad because they only knew a way. They were like, selecting all from everybody in that state, selecting every credit card that was in that state, bringing it to Excel, and then using Excel to normalize it to pick out the 10 they wanted. Then they were putting it on a USB, and they were walking it over to the multifunction thing, and then they were faxing it from there. Because that's how they've done it for 15 years. They didn't know that we had already written them a report, and they could download it and do a digital fax from the system. Once we taught them that, that whole thing went away, and we could lock them back down like everybody else. Let's look at this bash and host zone a little bit. What's important about this zone, and maybe I didn't mention it before, is something along the lines of what happened in the Sony breach. If somebody breaks into your corporate environment, and you really have to assume that somebody's going to break into your corporate environment, somebody will get phished. Somebody will use the same password as, eBay.com or their home Wi-Fi. Somebody will have something happen. They'll get their laptop stolen. They'll be stupid. They'll log into Starbucks Wi-Fi. You have to assume that your corporate environment will get breached. That should never, ever, 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 ever mean that they can get into your data center. And that's what's important about our middle zone here. We start to keystroke log. We make people have special roles. We make people have hard tokens. This is kind of a good debate between hard token, soft token, digital biometrics. Biometrics are kind of hard to implement in a data center when you don't have access to the thing. So we've instead say, well, there's a way to take over a soft token. You can, so we'll do a compromise of attack here. So hard token, you have to be FedExed, right? There's pretty much no way to compromise that unless you steal the FedEx. Soft token, though, I steal the admin account, I digitally provision that, I auto-set the code to quad zeros, I issue the token over email to person, I assign it to account that I just created, and all of a sudden I can log into your data center. And that's about a 2-minute activity to create a soft token that's emailed out that you can get in. So that's not a risk we were willing to take, so we threw away soft tokens. Hard token only. Multi-factor. Mentioned Citrix, we don't let the data leave our data center. Nobody has privileges to take anything out except the super knock people where we're in like a crisis down situation. And we're very, very, very specific on the number of user accounts we get. A couple years ago, we sort of had an epiphany that making the workplace frictionless is not right for everybody. Single sign-on, actually more importantly, silent single sign-on, for 100% of your stuff is bad. Because who wants silent single sign-on to a server in your data center? It's not good. Maybe your ERP and your, ask for time off and pay your bill and get your paycheck, fine, whatever. That's your stuff, your employee stuff. Not in the data center. So no single sign-on in our data center. Not okay. People have to have a different account, has to be a different password. It's much more stringent. Sorry, you work at PayPal, you got to live with that. We lead with trust. You're going to have to learn to deal with that. In the data center is where we get draconian. And what's important about this is you can't be scared of developers. I've given a bunch of talks at cloud conferences where we're one of the biggest OpenStack shops in the world. And we are all about blah, blah, blah as a service, DevOps, SecDevOps, high-speed pushing. And I still today have a conversation with somebody, and they come up to me and they say, I'm the developer of PayPal.com, I need access to the data center. And everybody around me reacts and says, no, you're a developer, you can't have access to the data center. But then you have to remember to have a conversation with them. You can't be scared of that guy because his name is Steve and he's the developer. You have to realize that he's the production L4 support guy who's been up for 3 days trying to fix this. He needs an L4 support role in addition to that developer role. So in the corporate workspace, he's a developer, so he can check out a GitHub. In the data center, he's my app L4. He can get to his 4 servers to do whatever he wants because that is his job. So you need to essentially micro-segment some of these people into the things that they support. And so when people ask me, how do you do security and be agile? My position right now is you can only do security if you can be agile. There is, we lost a long time ago with this whole fixed perimeter stuff, whatever, all these things over the last 10 years. You have to be able to be agile with these things. Roles need to be auto-provisioned. It needs to be in your system. You need to centrally manage it. You need to put it in tools that apply all the time. In our environment, things sort of roll up. Keystroke logging in our case is done with PowerBroker. It logs everything that people do in all of production. They cannot break out of it. So you're logged on the Bastion host on the way in, you're logged on the Citrix on the way in, and you're also logged on the resultant hosts all across the environment. Sometimes we have machines that are read-only. You don't really need to log something on a read-only Docker container. But you have to log everything else. They do not get to sudo auto that. They can't start a new shell. That is a required thing. We have caught people covering their tracks. You would be surprised at the times, or maybe you wouldn't if you've been in the business long enough. People are doing a change ticket at 2 a.m. on a weekend. They accidentally drop the table. They hurry up and put it back so nobody notices. They caused an outage so small that only they know. But we can see all that in the keystroke logs now because we detected it as an anomaly. They shouldn't have ever typed drop in that database. That's not an allowed command without a change ticket. Going back to the roles appropriate. In a world where your data center is managed by some kind of Active Directory, LDAP, you link the two, something. Out of the box, usually, everybody gets access to everything if you're joined to the AD. You can log into every server because you're in the remote desktop group. You can log into everything because you're in group 200, which is called engineering. That's too much access in your data center. You have to start to segment the roles to what you can do on a certain swath of servers. Our batch environment is pretty critical to us. It moves people's money around. It's one of the first places we started, again, at the sort of what matters to us. Don't let anybody log into that unless they're a batch operator. The My App guy who I talked about before, he should never be able to log into a batch server. So I don't care if he's an LDAP. I care if he's got the batch role on the batch server. And again, I keystroke log him when he logs in. And in some cases, I'm starting to get to the world, because I have a cloud, and this is something I wanted to mention, I'm actually going to start removing all of my tools from my disposable servers. If I have 10,000 things that do exactly the same thing, I'll just monitor it. If anything ever changes, file changes, somebody logs in, or there's an error, I am just going to kill it and rebuild it. I am not going to spend time investigating it when I have 9,999 things that do the exact same thing. It's just a waste of time. That goes to the stop doing things manually. Like, all these tools work together now as a workflow. In our case, we're trying to build an access management central based on Oracle. You go in and you request a role. After you get the right approval, that role is provisioned into the data center. That gives you access to all the servers you want, the roles you need, and the tools auto-apply because they're already there during the automation of the build process. Out of Kickstart, Puppet, Docker, CF Engine, whatever we have all over the place, SCCM, it just puts that stuff on. You have to assume that the minute something is built, whether or not it has gone through your go live process, if it is on your network, it is a risk to you. I think if you look at the details in the Verizon report, you'll see a very high case of the point of entry was the Windows 2003 server that they had left over there. Or it was the server over there that they hadn't finished provisioning yet. Or we did this project and we canceled it, but we left the thing. If you automate all those controls out of the gate and have no rules on it, it's a lot safer than if you make people do tickets to put your security controls on. And then equally important is, how do you pull access really fast? So let's say for a minute my Splunk throws an alert that my account has been compromised while I'm at Gartner. They need to be able to pull the plug on my access in seconds, and it goes away all across the company. My AD goes away, my token dies, my security accounts dies. This is the reactive part. I detect, I destroy, as long as I can put it back quick. Of course, you don't want to deprovision everybody's stuff and delete it, but you have to at least lock their account out so it can't get any worse. So I'll finish this by how to pull this all off, right? This is not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing in it. We're like 12 years old. It's not easy for us. A little bit easier if you have 10, 20, 50 servers. It's easy if you just have a few employees. So we have kind of gone through a sort of standard maturity cycle here. The first two bullets you could argue, are in the wrong order. But I have found that the security people usually need to be ready for the money. You don't need to convince people it's a good idea. You need to build your use cases behind the scenes, have somebody picked through a formal process that's fair, so that when something happens, your manager comes to Gartner and comes home and says, I need an IAM solution, you can say, hey, look, I've already done the research and we should pick this one. Go ahead and sign the check. Select them, maybe or maybe not, you need to convince them that it's a good idea. Do it with business use cases. My apologies to Gartner, but the only requirements cannot be there in the top right quadrant. It has to be, and this saves my business over here because I wrote this use case and customer service people are doing the wrong thing and you should be scared about that. If you are the executive vice president, you can accept that risk or you can let me buy this tool. If you're going to put your job on the line, fine, right? Sign here, right? We'll call that a risk acceptance, not an exception. Otherwise, we buy this tool and we put the security stuff in place. Contracts, pricing, legal, etc. Partnerships is key. Bring people in from the right people who are going to be impacted. We started with sysadmins when we deployed some of this stuff. Everybody is used to hand managing sudoers in the Unix space, if people speak Unix. When we rolled out PowerBroker, we said, we could change everything that you do about your job, and we could make you do it this way. And they all said really bad things to us. So we instead said, all right, fine. We don't want to change every KBase article, so how about we just skin it a little bit and start logging what you type? And they said, great, that's fine. Now I don't need to change anything. You do whatever you want. We send it to Splunk. Their job didn't change. We're a year into this now. Now we can turn the screws a little bit. Now they've decided we're not going to mess up their life. Because I have built their trust in me. I used to be a sysadmin, so I cheated a little bit. But they have to trust you to not break their job. Because we all know that the last thing that people want to do is hate coming to work because they can't do their job because the security team did something stupid. So make sure you partner. Make sure you have your identities in place with your IAM solution. Maybe you have 1, 2, or 5. It doesn't really matter if it's connected or disconnected. But please make sure you build those primary business use cases with the people you're about to impact so you can get them on board with the philosophy of what you're doing. Goes without saying, do it in a lab first, please. We often have an argument of if it's a security problem or an availability problem. The last thing you want to do is cause an availability problem through security things because they won't let you do it again a second time. Oops, sorry, I caused an outage because I took away everybody's rights. My bad. People who have tried to ever lock down service accounts. And my favorite is, my auditor said we have to rotate service account passwords every 90 days. So I turned on the account lockout feature. So every 90 days, my service accounts lock out. You know what happens when a service account locks out? An availability problem. So don't do that. Just don't do that. Production install, go slow, baby steps. Create your roles. This is where you start with the most scary, the biggest, the most important. And then lock down a little bit of time. You cannot have this be a project. This has to go into your DNA. You have to build a continuous maturity process for this because if you don't, you'll end up with your first 100 roles and then everybody else will get added to those first 100 roles over the next 5 years. If you don't have a process for continue adding new things, adding new servers, pretty soon you end up in a world where your first role was Unix engineering, but because you've never created a dev engineering role, those people get added to Unix engineering because it's easier. Don't do that. So to summarize, and I think this is it, I have time to take 5 minutes of questions. We don't think we can react anymore, so we've installed the tools across our environment to help control who the people are, give them access, track them, respond with use cases, but don't say no, say how. And that's really big for us. Don't say no, say how. I think that's it. Thank you. Questions, anybody? In front.
It's an excellent topic.
Thanks.
How did it end up here? Were there any pivotal points where you had to course correct and come to this point, or organically, smoothly?
So people are aware, I think, that PayPal used to be part of eBay, and eBay may or may not have had a big password reset event about 2 years ago. So I would have to admit that that helped a little bit. Sony and Target were very big management wake-up things. But one thing about PayPal that the founders always believed is that the trust word really was the most important thing. We have probably one of the most stringent environments I've ever worked in, especially in the data center. We really used to lead with no. We want to move this file to a third party. No. Like, really, it was no. We've just morphed to, okay, that didn't work, so let's go to how. And we didn't have a log, so now let's track it. So it's kind of all-encompassing. If you're starting from nothing, first assume you'll lose. You know, we've even admitted that we'll probably lose to a nation-state attacker if they came after us. Everybody will lose against a nation-state attacker. But what's important is you have to at least acknowledge that you shouldn't lose against the script kiddies. Start there. Anybody else? Back here, middle.
Yeah, great presentation.
Thanks.
I see in one of your slides that you delineated the CIO organization and the CISO organization. If you could speak to that a little bit, and also you ruled out soft token. Have you considered soft token on some different device, such as a mobile device that's not the same as the potentially compromised laptop?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we separate the security organization from the corporate organization, we have to acknowledge that the security people are really bad at managing desktops. And so we have acknowledged that the desktop managers can also manage things like antivirus. Today, antivirus really just comes with the desktops. And so when we segment the OCI organization from the security organization, we of course have the things like creating policies and standards. Those translate into technical controls, and quite often those technical controls are owned by the subject matter technology expert. And so in the OCIO world, who best to know how DLP should apply to customer service than the customer service technical team? And so when we separate things like this, our OCIO is accountable for breaking the call center and stuff. So he sort of has to own the implementation. But we're accountable for making sure that all subgroups that have to do that, you know, across all my entities, across that and some other spaces, we're accountable for the roll-up. And so I guess that's how it's separate. And then on the soft token thing, so we've acknowledged that things like MDM through like AirWatch or Mobile Iron, we have accepted that. So in the past, people used to just do the Microsoft Sync with the built-in Apple tool. So today, they have to at least use some other factor. So yes, you register that with any token, and then you can sync your email after that. So we've at least made the path to entry a little bit tougher. We've also decided that certain VPN use cases or third-party call center use cases could use a digital certificate or a soft token in certain use cases because there's other controls behind it. For example, if you're in a captive citrus farm, maybe a soft token's okay. If you hit full access, a soft token's not okay. So yes, there are very certain technology areas that soft tokens are just fine. Anybody else before lunch? Up two here, more in the middle.
Well, you're the next one.
Just question, I know that we all want to not say no, but occasionally there are times when we do have to say no. One of the things we've struggled with is educating our personnel so that they don't ask things that would be a no, and to ask things that would be compliant. How have you developed your education program for security?
That's a good question. So we have two levels. We have the, of course, general 101, everybody gets to take things. But we've started to develop flowchart run books for people. My architecture team has built things like, here are the appropriate ways to move files at PayPal that have restricted data in it, so that people don't need to like recreate the how. Like, we know there's 5 ways to do it. Pick from the 5. So the run book thing really has been successful. We've done encryption, we've done tools you can pick, we've done password vaults, we've done file movement, and we've done web surfing. Here are the appropriate ways to do it. If you fail out at the bottom of the flowchart, then come see us. And everybody's loved that so far. So the flowchart idea works for us. There's 2 people ahead there. I think that's the last question, I think.
So this has to do with admins needing support from third-party vendors.
Mm-hmm.
When there's a system issue, a lot of my admins say, I can't get out to the internet because we need to do a WebEx session, and they can't help me with it if I can't do that. So do you allow internet access at the Citrix layer, in your chart, or how is it that you meet this functionality, or how do you meet this?
So that's a good question. So first of all, we have a lot of vendors that have tokens. So we have named people at the vendors. I'm big enough to have vendor contacts. So Bob at Cisco can VPN in like he's an employee. So for the really scary things, we do that. But on the WebEx side, go to meeting, whatever, we have them do that from their corporate PC. So if the vendor watches that, all the token characteristics are hidden on the way in, so they then go with the ICA client to the Citrix and from Citrix in. And the vendor can watch out here on the edge. They don't need to watch from the middle, they watch from the edge. So in almost every case, we've done that, except some very specific pinned third-party data center things. Okay. All right, I think we're done. Thanks, everybody, for coming.